Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Young and the Restless channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The walls of the psychiatric facility felt colder than usual as tension settled over every silent hallway, and inside one quiet room, Mariah Copeland sat with nerves twisting deep in her chest. The weight of everything she had done still lingered around her like a storm cloud she couldn't escape, and every passing second seemed to remind her how fragile her future had become. When Devin Winters unexpectedly arrived for a surprise meeting, the anxiety in Mariah's eyes immediately sharpened, because she knew this conversation could either crack open a path toward healing or push her even deeper into isolation. Devin carried more than anger into that room. He carried betrayal, confusion, disappointment, and the unbearable memory of the chaos surrounding Dominic's disappearance. Yet, despite the tension hanging between them, he also brought something softer, something unexpectedly human. In his hands was a homemade card from Dominic, filled with innocent affection and well wishes that pierced straight through Mariah's guarded emotions. The simple gesture hit harder than any accusation ever could, because Dominic, too young to fully understand the darkness surrounding the situation, still saw her through the pure lens of love and familiarity. To him, the terrifying ordeal had merely been a game of hide-and-seek that lasted too long, and that heartbreaking innocence only made the emotional wounds inside the room feel even heavier. As Devin spoke, his frustration became impossible to hide, and the pain beneath his anger finally surfaced in ways Mariah hadn't fully seen before. He admitted that Dominic had been asking questions about her, worrying about her, even asking if he could visit her. And those words shattered something inside Mariah as guilt washed over her face. Devin struggled to understand how someone he trusted could make such a devastating decision, and the fact that Mariah wasn't sitting behind bars continued to eat away at him. Every instinct inside him demanded accountability, punishment, and answers that still didn't fully exist. But as the conversation stretched on, something began to shift. Mariah slowly opened up about the therapy she had been receiving, about the darkness she had fallen into, and about the crushing regret that haunted her every waking moment. Her voice carried the exhaustion of someone desperately trying to find her way back to herself. And for the first time in a long while, Devin allowed himself to truly listen instead of simply judging. The anger in his eyes didn't disappear, but it softened around the edges as he realized the woman sitting in front of him was already living inside her own punishment. Even if forgiveness remained far away, Devin no longer seemed ready to slam the door on the possibility forever. The emotional distance between them remained undeniable, but there was now a fragile thread of understanding beginning to form where only bitterness had existed before. Devin made it painfully clear that Dominic would not be around Mariah anytime soon, because trust once broken could not magically rebuild overnight. Still, beneath all his caution and lingering resentment, there was a quiet sincerity in his voice when he admitted he wanted her to heal. He wanted the old Mariah back, the loving, grounded woman everyone once recognized before fear and trauma consumed her judgment. That confession landed with enormous emotional weight, because for Mariah it represented the first flicker of hope she had seen in what felt like an endless emotional nightmare. The sterile room suddenly felt less suffocating, as the possibility of redemption hovered delicately in the air, uncertain but alive. Outside those walls, life in Genoa City continued moving forward, but inside that conversation, two people stood at the crossroads between permanent destruction and the painful possibility of rebuilding. The wounds were still raw, the trust still fractured, and the scars still impossible to ignore. Yet the door to healing had finally cracked open just enough to let a little light inside. Meanwhile, another storm was quietly brewing elsewhere as Daniel Romalotti Jr. found himself increasingly troubled by the sudden disappearance of Danny Romalotti. At first, the silence felt strange, but manageable. Yet, as more time passed without answers, concern began tightening around Daniel's thoughts. Danny going completely off the radar was deeply unlike him, and every unanswered question only intensified the growing sense that something was very wrong. That fear eventually pushed Daniel toward Christine Blair Romalotti, and the two came together to compare notes while trying to make sense of the unsettling situation. But the moment Phyllis Summers entered the conversation, the atmosphere instantly exploded with tension. Christine's fury toward Phyllis burned hotter than ever after learning about the desperate scheme involving Matt Clark and the attempt to manipulate the justice system through leverage. The rivalry between these two women had already survived years of resentment and emotional warfare, but now the hostility carried an even sharper edge because lives, reputations, and legal consequences were all colliding at once. Daniel quickly realized he was standing directly between two emotional hurricanes, and despite his best efforts to play peacemaker, the conflict threatened to spiral far beyond his control. As Christine laid out the details of Phyllis's actions, Daniel's expression darkened with disbelief and frustration. Phyllis had been clinging to a dangerous plan, one that depended on handing Matt Clark over to Nick Newman in exchange for dropped charges and securing the future of Summer's conglomerate. In Phyllis's mind, it was a calculated move, born from desperation, survival, and her relentless instinct to protect what she believed belonged to her family. But Christine refused to bend under pressure, and her outrage only intensified at the thought of justice being treated like a bargaining chip. The more Daniel listened, the harder it became for him to defend his mother's choices, especially when the entire situation was already falling apart. Phyllis had lost track of Matt entirely, leaving her without the leverage she believed would save her. Suddenly, the carefully constructed plan she had been depending on looked dangerously unstable, like a collapsing tower ready to crush everyone standing beneath it. The emotional weight of disappointment settled heavily over Daniel as he realized just how far things had spiraled out of control. He wanted peace, solutions, and some path forward that didn't destroy the people he loved. But every new revelation seemed to drag the family deeper into chaos instead. And somewhere in the shadows of Genoa City, Matt Clark's mysterious journey was becoming even more dangerous and unpredictable. Still trapped in the fog of amnesia, Matt remained vulnerable, confused, and surrounded by enemies whose motives continued tightening around him like invisible chains. Yet he wasn't entirely alone. Patty Williams emerged once again as an unpredictable force, stepping into the chaos with her own unsettling sense of loyalty and determination. While danger closed in around Matt, it appeared he would eventually find himself tied up and helpless at some point during the coming days, leaving his fate hanging in terrifying uncertainty. But Patty, chaotic as ever, would reportedly arrive to free him, throwing another shocking twist into an already unstable situation. Her involvement guaranteed that nothing about Matt's future would remain simple, and with his fractured memory still hiding untold secrets, even greater shockers waited just ahead. The uncertainty surrounding him cast a dark shadow over everyone connected to the situation because nobody truly knew what Matt remembered, what truths were still buried inside his mind, or how dangerous those hidden answers could become once they finally surfaced. As alliances shifted, tempers exploded, and emotional wounds deepened across Genoa City, every storyline seemed to move toward an unavoidable collision course where betrayal, redemption, and heartbreak would once again change lives forever. As night slowly settled over Genoa City, the emotional aftershocks of the day refused to fade, and for many of the people caught in the center of the chaos, sleep became impossible. The city itself seemed quieter than usual, but beneath the calm streets and glowing windows, lives were unraveling one painful revelation at a time. Inside the psychiatric facility, Mariah Copeland remained awake long after Devin Winters left, replaying every word of their conversation over and over in her mind. Dominic's homemade card rested carefully in her hands like something fragile and sacred, and the sight of his innocent handwriting nearly broke her all over again. For the first time since everything collapsed around her, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't entirely consumed by punishment and shame. It was still distant, still uncertain, but Devin's willingness to listen had planted something inside her that therapy alone could not provide. Hope. Yet hope could be dangerous when trust had been shattered so completely. And Mariah knew one conversation would never erase the fear and damage she had caused. Even so, as tears quietly filled her eyes, the crushing isolation that had surrounded her for weeks no longer felt quite as unbearable. Elsewhere, Devin drove through the darkened streets with his own emotions spiraling beneath the surface. He wanted to stay angry at Mariah because anger was easier than vulnerability. easier than confronting the complicated truth that part of him still cared about the woman who had once been family. Seeing her broken down, remorseful, and painfully self-aware had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. The image of Dominic asking about Mariah kept replaying in his mind, forcing Devon to wrestle with impossible questions about forgiveness, healing, and whether redemption could truly exist after such a devastating betrayal. Protecting his son would always come first, and he refused to take risks with Dominic's emotional safety. But the absolute certainty he once felt about cutting Mariah out forever had begun to crack, replaced by uncomfortable doubt and lingering compassion. Devon hated how complicated the situation had become because emotions rarely followed logic, especially when family bonds were involved. And somewhere deep inside him, beneath the anger and resentment, there remained a painful desire for things to somehow stop hurting the people he loved. At the same time, another emotional battlefield was unfolding as Daniel Romolati Jr. found himself drowning in frustration over the growing disaster surrounding Phyllis Summers. What began as concern over Danny Romolati's disappearance had now collided with a storm of legal trouble, manipulation, and dangerous secrets. Daniel could see the walls closing in around his mother, but for once, even his loyalty struggled against the weight of her choices. Christine Blair Romolati's anger had not been theatrical or exaggerated. It had come from genuine outrage at the thought of justice being twisted for personal gain. Phyllis's desperate attempt to use Matt Clark as leverage had crossed lines that even Daniel found difficult to defend, especially now that the plan itself was collapsing. Matt had vanished from her control completely, leaving her vulnerable and exposed at the exact moment she needed certainty most. Daniel stood caught between protecting his family and confronting the uncomfortable reality that Phyllis's relentless need to control every situation had once again pushed everyone closer to disaster. The emotional exhaustion on his face revealed a man who desperately wanted peace, but kept finding himself trapped inside endless cycles of chaos created by the people he loved most. For Phyllis, however, desperation had become stronger than fear. Every move she made now carried the frantic energy of someone trying to stop her world from slipping through her fingers. Summers' conglomerate represented more than business success. It represented survival, legacy, identity, and the future she had fought relentlessly to build. Losing control of that future felt unbearable to her, and the pressure was driving her into increasingly reckless territory. Yet, the more she tried to regain control, the more everything seemed to unravel around her. Christine refused to negotiate away justice. Nick Newman could no longer guarantee protection. And Matt Clark had disappeared before Phyllis could secure the one advantage she believed might save her. The realization left her standing on dangerously unstable ground, with legal consequences looming closer by the hour. Even worse, the people around her were beginning to lose faith in her judgment, and that emotional isolation cut deeper than she would ever openly admit. Beneath Phyllis's fierce determination and fiery confidence was a growing terror that she may have finally pushed things too far to recover. Meanwhile, hidden far from the public eye, Matt Clark's situation was becoming darker and more unpredictable with every passing moment. His fractured memory left him vulnerable to manipulation, confusion, and fear, and the lingering emptiness inside his mind created a constant sense of instability. Faces, names, alliances, nothing fully connected, leaving him trapped in a reality where he could no longer trust even his own thoughts. The people searching for him all seemed to want something different, yet none of them truly appeared safe. Then came another shocking turn as Matt reportedly found himself restrained and helpless, caught in a terrifying situation where control had once again been ripped away from him. Fear and frustration mounted as he struggled to understand why everyone around him treated him like a dangerous key to secrets he couldn't even remember. But just when things appeared completely hopeless, Patty Williams emerged from the shadows once more. Wildly unpredictable yet fiercely committed in her own distorted way, Patty stepped into the chaos to free Matt, turning the situation upside down yet again. Her arrival changed the emotional energy instantly, because whenever Patty became involved, stability disappeared and danger intensified. The mystery surrounding Matt's lost memories continued to grow heavier, casting suspicion and uncertainty across everyone connected to him. Somewhere inside his damaged mind were answers powerful enough to threaten multiple lives, and the closer those answers came to resurfacing, the more dangerous the situation became for everyone involved. Patty seemed determined to protect him at all costs, but even her loyalty carried an unsettling unpredictability that made every moment feel volatile. As the city moved deeper into uncertainty, alliances shifted quietly behind closed doors, trust continued breaking apart, and emotional wounds widened with every confrontation. No one seemed fully in control anymore. Devon battled compassion he never expected to feel again. Mariah clung to the fragile possibility of redemption. Daniel struggled to hold his fractured family together, and Phyllis fought desperately against consequences closing in from every direction. And looming over all of them was the growing mystery of Matt Clark, a man trapped between forgotten truths and dangerous enemies, unknowingly carrying secrets capable of detonating everything around him. In true Genoa City fashion, the calm before the next storm had already begun, and once the buried truths finally surfaced, nobody's life would remain untouched. By the following morning, Genoa City felt like a city balancing on the edge of a cliff, suspended in that uneasy silence that comes just before everything falls apart. The tension surrounding Matt Clark's disappearance had spread quietly through interconnected lives, touching nearly everyone involved in the growing web of betrayal, fear, and desperation. Rumors moved through private conversations and guarded phone calls, while unanswered questions continued to pile higher with every passing hour. Somewhere out there, Matt remained hidden from the people searching for him, yet the danger surrounding him only seemed to tighten. His missing memories had transformed him into something more than a vulnerable man struggling with amnesia. He had become the center of a storm capable of exposing devastating truths. Nobody fully understood what he remembered, what he might recover, or what consequences would explode once those memories finally returned. That uncertainty was exactly what made him so dangerous, and everyone connected to him could feel the pressure mounting beneath the surface. Phyllis Summers, meanwhile, found herself unraveling beneath the weight of consequences she could no longer control. The confidence she usually carried like armor had started to crack, revealing flashes of genuine panic underneath her fierce exterior. Every failed phone call, every dead end, and every passing hour without locating Matt pushed her deeper into desperation. She had built her entire plan around finding him first and trading that advantage for protection. Protection from legal disaster, protection for Summers' conglomerate, and protection for herself. But now the strategy that once seemed brilliant was collapsing piece by piece right in front of her eyes. Christine Blair Romalotti remained immovable, refusing to compromise or soften her stance no matter how much pressure mounted around the case. To Christine, justice mattered more than deals, manipulation, or emotional pleas, and Phyllis's attempts to bend the rules had only fueled her determination further. The rivalry between the two women had transformed into something colder and more dangerous, because this was no longer just personal resentment. It had become a war over accountability, morality, and survival. And as Phyllis sat alone, wrestling with the reality of losing control, she began realizing that the consequences heading toward her might finally be unavoidable. Daniel Romalotti Jr. could see that collapse happening in real time, and the helplessness inside him became harder to hide. He loved his mother fiercely, but love did not erase disappointment, and it certainly could not erase the damage being done around them. Watching Phyllis spiral into reckless decision-making forced Daniel into an agonizing emotional conflict. Part of him wanted to shield her from the fallout the way he always had, yet another part understood why people were losing patience with her choices. At the same time, his growing concern for Danny Romalotti never left the back of his mind. Danny's disappearance still hung heavily over everything, creating an undercurrent of fear beneath the already explosive tensions surrounding Matt Clark. Daniel tried to keep everyone calm, tried to stop conversations from becoming full-scale wars, but peace felt impossible when distrust had poisoned nearly every relationship involved. Every attempt to fix things seemed to create new complications instead, and exhaustion was beginning to show on his face. He was carrying too many emotional fires at once, and no matter which direction he turned, another crisis waited for him there. Across town, Christine remained unwavering, though beneath her fierce determination was a growing emotional exhaustion of her own. She had spent years watching people in Genoa City manipulate the system whenever it suited them, and Phyllis's latest maneuver struck a nerve she could no longer ignore. To Christine, allowing someone to use a vulnerable man like Matt Clark as legal leverage crossed a moral line that could not simply be excused away. She understood fear, desperation, and the instinct to protect loved ones, but none of that justified circumventing justice itself. Her anger toward Phyllis burned intensely because it came from genuine conviction, not petty rivalry alone. Yet even Christine couldn't completely ignore the emotional damage rippling through everyone involved. Daniel's pain was obvious. The uncertainty around Danny was alarming. And somewhere beneath all the legal warfare was the uncomfortable truth that almost everyone caught in this situation was operating from fear in one form or another. But fear, Christine believed, could not become an excuse for destroying accountability, and she refused to back down no matter how emotionally complicated things became. Meanwhile, far away from the polished offices and emotional confrontations unfolding across the city, Matt Clark's nightmare continued growing more surreal and terrifying. Disoriented and emotionally fractured, he struggled to separate truth from manipulation as flashes of memory teased him like ghosts he couldn't fully reach. Small fragments surfaced unexpectedly, faces, voices, moments of fear, but nothing stayed clear long enough to give him real answers. The deeper he fell into confusion, the more vulnerable he became to the dangerous people circling around him. Being restrained and powerless had already pushed him to the edge emotionally, leaving him overwhelmed by fear and frustration he could barely process. Then Patty Williams burst back into his life once again, unpredictable as ever, arriving with chaotic determination and rescuing him before the situation became even worse. Her presence brought immediate relief, but also fresh instability, because Patty's loyalty came wrapped inside volatility that could explode without warning. She saw herself as Matt's protector, his ally against the enemies hunting him. Yet even Matt couldn't fully understand whether he was truly safe with her or simply trapped inside a different kind of danger. Patty's fixation on protecting Matt only deepened the strange emotional atmosphere surrounding them. There were moments where her care appeared almost sincere, almost touching, but underneath it lingered an unpredictability that kept everything dangerously unstable. Matt, trapped inside his fractured state of mind, clung desperately to any sense of safety he could find, even as his instincts warned him that nothing about the situation was normal. The buried secrets inside his mind continued hovering just out of reach, and every passing day increased the possibility that those memories could return suddenly and violently. If they did, the fallout would be catastrophic. Too many lives, too many reputations, and too many carefully hidden truths depended on Matt remaining confused and silent. Back in Genoa City, nobody realized just how close they were to an explosion of revelations that could permanently alter relationships forever. Mariah struggled toward redemption. Devin wrestled with forgiveness. Daniel fought to keep his family from falling apart, and Phyllis desperately searched for control slipping through her fingers. But beyond all those emotional battles waited an even greater reckoning, because the truth surrounding Matt Clark was moving steadily closer to the surface. And once it finally emerged, the shockwaves would tear through Genoa City with devastating force.